I'm very much looking forward to the assessment and how it can help us rebuild our program.
Great.
And train staff.
Jean, what organization are you with?
Sorry, I neglected to say that. I'm with Opt in Guyana. Opt stands for One Positive Thing in Guyana, and it's a standalone nonprofit youth group that was founded by my daughter actually when she was 16. And we are currently renovating a building. For the first time, we'll actually have a building.
Thank you. And Aaron, how about yourself?
I'm really hoping to just review the whole organizational quality assessment Form B process because it's been a year since we've done them.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. We did hit record for this because Amanda and a few others said that they wouldn't be able to attend, so we are going to be sending out that recording afterwards. So we're going to start off by talking a bit more about what is Form B and how it fits in. So our agenda, we're going to talk about our Form B or the agency quality assessment. We use the term Form B just because it's a lot shorter, and that's the kind of the common name toward the tool itself. We'll talk about the Form B process, and we'll get a chance to do some question and answer towards the end. We'll also dive into the tool and give you both a chance to explore more with the tool. So how does it all fit inside of our quality improvement process? So our youth program quality initiative, as you've probably seen and heard multiple times, it goes through these three phases of assess, plan, improve. So the first part is always doing an assessment. So observing programming, collecting data about your program. In this case, that assessment or collecting data will be an interview that will talk about what that looks like to be able to assess data at the organizational level. We'll then go through a planning process. So that is our planning with data workshop that really looks at the data and figures out what is maybe one or two areas of focus of improvement for your organization across the organization that you'd like to focus on. And then that next and final kind of piece to our initiative is improve. So during the quality improvement phase, which is over 90 days, really from about January through March, you'll get a chance to have coaching both from Aaron, myself, Anna, Lily, our entire team, to be able to have a chance to really work towards your goal and talk through what are some ways that we can focus on those agency level focuses on improvement. So the assessment or Form B, so again, this is the agency quality assessment tool. So this is an optional assessment done in addition to the YPQA or SAPQA. So the Youth Program Quality Assessment Tool or that School Age Program Quality Assessment Tool. The organizational assessment is really done as to look at what are the organizational supports. So what are the things not that's happening at program, but what's happening inside of our policy and procedures or our practices and staff hiring or staff training that's help support and reinforce those best practices that are in Form A. So in that YPQA or that SAPQA. Again, the YPQA, SAPQA, that's about what happens at site. That's an assessment either done as a self-assessment by staff or by an external assessment like someone like Aaron or someone from our team coming out to do an external assessment at the site. This organizational assessment is outside of that. We never will step foot. You will not see me at your program to do this assessment. This is us talking really at the director and administrative level around that. So it provides that data really to have an administrative level goal to be set with planning with data. So it allows us to look to see again, organizationally, what are some of the things we need to do inside of our admin level to be able to support what's happening at that direct service level with our staff members. I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions first on the intent behind the agency's quality assessment or Form B and to what its focus is.
This is Jean. I don't have a question, but I think this will be very helpful for our board as well, to
Right.
get feedback.
Super. Great. And I see we're going to pause for a moment. I'm seeing Julia Smith joining in with us. Wait for her to get her audio going. Might be a little longer than a pause than I thought. All right, we'll keep rolling. You'll get logged in when she gets connected in. And Aaron, if you can for me, just keep track of if anyone else joins in for a participant waiting room. Thank you. So what does the process look like? So the organizations that are choosing to do the Form B training, Julia, welcome. Thanks for joining us. We are just getting started here. So organizations that choose to do Form B or the agency quality assessment tool will sign up to do an interview. Those interviews will be conducted by myself, and if I don't have the ability or time to, Aaron will be there. So that interview occurs where the network staff interviews the program, or there's either the administrator or director. Sometimes it's maybe a pair or a team of folks at the office. So Marcy, that might maybe be you and Darcy at your office, or you may just choose yourself. Jean, it might be you and maybe one of your board of directors if you wanted to get engaged on, or it could just be yourself. So it's going to look different for agencies, but it's really designed to be the person who is the organization leader or coordinator at that piece. Network staff and the interviewees score all the tool items together, and we'll get a chance to look at the tool here in a moment throughout the interview. Our network staff, we do all the scoring and logging. Ultimately, we will enter your data into our scores report or database so you can pull that data anytime. The network will have access to the data as well. And then the data is used inside of the planning with data workshop to be able to set a goal based on your agency level assessment data to help really drive what are the internal processes at the admin level that we need to do to help support quality at the program site level. Aaron, if you could drop in the chat box the tool so folks have a copy of the tool as we go. So Aaron's going to put a copy of the agency quality assessment tool, or Form B, into the chat box. So you can go ahead and download that to view it. And we'll get a chance to also look at it. I'll pull it up in a moment too later on as we're going through. We're going to dive in more on the structure of what Form B looks like. So just like in the Form A or the Youth Program Quality Assessment Tool or School Age Quality Assessment Tool, Form B is looking and divided into some key categories that we want to be able to understand. So you can see up top, there is a red circle that says domain. The domain is a high-arching category that contains scales and items inside of it. So in this case, we're looking on the screen, you can see there is domain, high expectation for youth and staff. And inside of it, then there are some scales inside of it. You see the one circled right now is high expectation for youth. So you're able to see that there's a domain, underneath the domain is a scale, and then there are interview questions that we as the network staff would ask you, the coordinators, to help us be able to find out more information about what's going on in a program. Because you'll see in a moment, inside there are indicators. So for each domain, there's scales, and each scales, there's indicators. Those indicators are the best practices that we can see in an organization. And those indicators are noted at 1, 3, and 5. 5 being the optimal, 1 being an area of growth or improvement. Now, it is okay for an organization to have 1s, to have 3s, to have 5s, though we are expecting that. We don't expect every program to have a 5 on every category. That's oftentimes kind of seen out of reach, and it might not be realistic for every program for the type of programming you're doing. But 5s are considered the best practice inside of the industry of out of school time that we want to reach toward. So the first part that I showed you here or this page right now that you're seeing on the slide, and you can see in the document, Aaron dropped in the chat box. Please download that, we'll be using it a little bit. You can see that there is, again, the domain, scale, and indicators are items inside with a score. How we get to that score is during the interview process. So Aaron or myself would meet with one of you. So I may meet with Julia, or I may meet with Marcy, and ask these interview questions. And throughout the document, what you'll see is all the interview questions we will ask are going to be in the document. So it's our way of asking and finding evidence that the item exists in your program. So sometimes it's useful beforehand to take a look at the document and see what might be some of the things that you want to pull, maybe from your policy and procedures or other items inside of your agency, to make sure, yeah, we do have that documented. But we'll go through and we'll look at each piece. So I want to take a look at, there are 3 domains inside of this tool. The first domain is youth-centered policies and practices. The second domain, high expectation for youth and staff. And the third is around access. So each of these domains have then scales and items inside of it, with this being the overarching item on top. So we'll take a look first at youth-centered practice, youth-centered policies and practices. So inside of that domain, there are 4 scales: staff qualifications, youth interest, youth influence settings and activities, youth influence policies. So again, inside of each of those scales, then there will be items that will score, and interview questions will ask to find out where that score would fall. Not every agency, again, will have 5s. This is one of the things you'll see in a moment. I'll show you actual data from 6 program sites engaged in this assessment last year, that depended on where they were is kind of where the data falls. So, but this whole domain area is really looking at if we are using the best practice of having youth voice, because we always ask our staff, make sure young people have, voice in their programming or what they're doing. We have to look at the organizational level, what is our practices at the agency or school district or nonprofit level that is supporting that to happen at the staff level. So this is going to look at, again, those organizational attributes. In the second domain area, high expectation for youth and staff, it's going to look at staff development, supportive social norms, high expectation for youth, and continuous quality and continuous improvement. So we'll look at, again, we'll ask interview questions based on the items that score to here, and we'll dive in. This is really looking at the organization. How are we setting high expectation both for our young people and for the staff that we have employed there to work with them, to really set our programs up on a footing that helps them exceed and excel. And what are those practices, again, at the agency or district level to support those practices in person on the ground? This last domain then is around access. So it's looking at consistent staff presence. It's looking at things such as schedules are in fact, it's addressing barriers, and it's about the organization's ability to communicate with families, schools, and community. So this is really looking at what are ways that we can address some of those access barriers or challenges that might be in place that we don't always think through when we're creating or running our programs at the organizational level that support getting more kids and families into program. So next, I'm going to pause there. Any questions on that kind of structure of domain, scales, and then the items inside? All right, not hearing any, we're going to keep rolling. So this is from data from 6 programs this past school year that went through the organizational assessment with us. So you can see here, this is based off of their overall database. This is one program score, not the collective score. We do have the ability to pull all programs' collective scores. But what we saw was pretty consistent across our agency types. That we saw programs scored lower on youth-centered policies and practices. They scored around in between or doing pretty good with high expectations for youth and staff. And then actually many of our programs did excellent with access. And that's largely because many of our programs in Alaska are free and have addressed transportation barriers. So that really helps us move forward, which is a really great thing to see because frequently that is an area that a lot of other programs struggle with. But here, for example, we're going to take a look at this is one agency's data. So right now they can see from the initial part that they scored lower on the domain youth-centered policies and practices. So they would want to take a deeper dive into looking to see what's going on there that they scored lower. So in this case, you can see a full layout of the data for them, both what they scored at the domain level, so the domain being that area in green, and the scales underneath it, which are in that the white and that kind of grayish color with the numbers. So if we just look at that top domain, so it's the domain that they scored the lowest in, that agency said, let's take a look at two of the categories that we scored the lowest and see what we can do to improve. So in this case, they scored lowest on youth have influence on the settings and activities in the organization, and youth have an influence on the structures and policies of the organization. So looking at those two pieces of information, they can then go and plan further. So diving into those two again through the domain and the scale, they're able to look to see what were the items inside of those scales that they wanted to focus on. So I'm going to give a pause for a moment and just give folks looking at this data set that we have here. What might be, what are the areas of maybe celebration that we can focus on, or maybe some of the things that we want to focus on. I think this might be an area we want to focus towards.
I have a question about this, and I think I've raised this many times before, but our program is elementary focused, and so we don't give a whole lot of opportunity other than clubs for our youth to make decisions or lead. Otherwise we would be watching Disney movies and eating Skittles all day long. So I feel like this is more of a secondary initiative, like once you get into middle school, maybe then youth could have more leadership. But with our kindergartners and first grades, I think it would be not the best program quality to have them be leading and making decisions.
Marcy, great question. I would say for that, if we look at the youth voice and youth leadership ladders and moving young people up that ladder of the shared decision making, that it might be not at the level that we're like, okay, we're working with kindergarten, first, second grade. What are ways that we can influence or put structure inside? So inside of the youth-led sessions, so what that might be is that it might be that maybe you have a young person, a third grader, who's helping to teach reading in your program to a younger age youth, or that youth are helping to facilitate a gym time activity, or maybe young people are helping to show new students on what their robotics is that they've done the week before. So there are ways that we can integrate young people leading sessions. And it's about really, again, what's the organizational practice that we can do or outlines we can put inside to help support that in place. So for example, something such as shared decision about the physical environment, that may, and sometimes our physical environment, we may only score one because we might not have any ability to change anything that we are. We might be in a teacher's classroom and that is their classroom and we can't change it. That is okay. At that point, score is a 1 because young people weren't able to be involved there. And we say that's something out of our organization's ability to change and adjust. We are not going to focus on that. Let's focus instead on another. Part of this is to help the agency look to see what are the things that are those conscious and unconscious things that where we put up a roadblock that prevent youth from being engaged inside of that higher level of youth voice development. Again, some of those might be things out of our control. You know, hey, we can't do anything about that during the school year because we're in a teacher's classroom. Maybe we want young people to help us design it during the summer when we have more flexibility to move around furniture or be in a new space. I think of Jean and Optin Kayana, where they're developing the space right now and they're building a new space and renovating a space. This is a great opportunity for her to look to see how are they engaging young people and talking about anything from the paint color to the physical design to the furniture to the setup of maybe a reading nook or other things of that. How this could fall in a program that has less ability to change the walls or change the color or change the furniture. This might be on looking at things such as, you know, if there is a peace corner or in some of our programs, they'll have a calming center. You know, how are we getting input from students about what items they would like to see there that would help them do that and calming activities. So there's ways that we as network staff will help support also in that coaching, that some of that coaching follow-up that you'll receive too from here, that if you did chose to say, oh, this is one that I'm interested in focusing on, I'm not sure what we can do here because of our limitation. That's where we'll work with the agency to help think through what that implementation could look like. And again, some programs may say that's something that we really don't have the ability. So you may say, where is it? Youth involved in hiring, training, and evaluating staff. You're like, I don't think that's something my elementary school students are going to be involved in. That's totally okay. You say, nope, that's an area that's not going to be it. But what we may want to explore looking at is, you know, hey, is that something that potentially your high school program aides could be involved in helping during that kind of interviewing process, or maybe when they're coming out to do a site visit? A lot of our programs bring new staff members out to do site visit before hiring on. You know, that might be a chance that you want that high school student who's a program aide to engage them and see, you know, how they do with working with that student. Or it might be sometimes we even see for that younger age program is, you know, how is student participation data about, you know, end of year survey, how is that helping to inform their evaluation? If students are saying the adults here aren't nice to me, that might be something that we want to look at and put in an evaluation to say, let's work on how we can change that agency culture. So there's different ways. Sometimes it might not be, sometimes it is. Youth involved in recruitment is young people talking to their peers about recruiting others to their program or passing out flyers in their classroom. So there's lots of ways we can explore this. Again, some of them might not be relevant for every program, but these are the best practices we're trying to move organizations to. Does that help, Marcy, maybe think through a little bit?
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you. And when you were saying some of the options, I was like, oh, we do that. We do that. We do that. Oh, we do that. So yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's part of it is thinking of it like, why are we doing that? And that's, to me, especially for when we're thinking of succession planning, like if you were to leave your position, it helps ground whoever is a new person back or your staff back when your staff are like, well, why do we have to ask young people this? Or why are we having young people here? Is because we can go back to this and say, here's the industry best practice on how to engage young people in voice. Any other questions?
This is Jean, I was just gonna say a lot of times if they can't be involved or making the big decisions, presenting them with choices, like we're gonna have a game time. So what are some games that you would like to play? So there are parameters for it. It's not wide open.
Yeah. And, you know, it might even be, you know, that's a great point. You know, like even when I look at underneath that scale, youth have influence on the structure and policies of the organization. So something like for youth involved in community outreach, you know, how are we asking young people, maybe we ask young people, can you help us develop a poster that we can put around the school to help recruit kids to come to our program? Or it might be that they are helping, put posters up around the community or developing a flyer, or that they are doing a kind of variety of other recruitment activities. That could even be for staff recruitment that they're doing. That's our kids are oftentimes the best people to be ambassadors of our program. So there's different ways we can explore and look to see that, and again, we're going to look to see what is developmentally appropriate and what's right for our host agency. Because sometimes there is what's the gold star, and then there is the reality of this is where I'm at today with our programming.
Yeah, we have cooking club at every single one of our sites. And at Tyson, last holiday for winter break, before winter break, they were making holiday cookies in cooking club, and they started talking about the kids, independent of their teacher, started talking about how some people don't have holiday cookies. And so they started talking about the homeless in Anchorage who won't have holiday cookies. And so they decided, they took a vote, and it was unanimous. They decided that they weren't going to eat their own cookies. They were going to give them to the homeless adults in Anchorage who didn't have cookies. So the teachers wrapped up all the cookies and brought them to Beans Cafe. And yeah, so that was
Great.
all the kids.
Yeah, so there's lots of ways that young people can have voice and choice inside of their program. And this is looking at that organizational policy level on what we have in place to help support staff to doing just what you talked about, Marcy, with young people having authentic voice in program. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull up right now our organizational assessment tool. And I'm going to see, is that showing right now, or is it still the slide deck? All right, great. So this is the Form B tool that Erin put in the chat box. If you didn't get it, we'll also email it afterwards. So again, you can see here the organizational assessment that says youth PQA. It really shouldn't. It should say organizational assessment. They just use the term youth more freely than school age. I'm going to skip a couple of pages. So this is our general information we will fill in when we're having our conversation, either Erin or I. When we are doing our interviews, this helps us just know what type of program it is. There is some general information we'll ask. You can see here inside of each of the parts, again, up top, you'll see the one up top, youth-centered policies and practices, that's the domain. And you'll see a bold item underneath it. That is which scale item it is. You'll see it written out. So in this case, staff qualifications. Staff qualifications support a positive youth development focus. So this is all about looking at, what are the staff qualifications that help us support youth development focus. So these are the actual items, but we don't even look at the items until we have first done the interview questions. So we, as the interviewees, will ask some questions about the program. We'll ask about the staff, what their experience is, how they've worked with young people, what's the amount of time. And then we go back and we score with the coordinator together. So this is not us sitting there and being like, we're going to judge you. This is a conversation that we have with the site coordinator, or not with the site coordinator, with the agency coordinator, to be able to have that. But I wanted to take a jump here. And sorry if we're going to make everyone a little dizzy here for a moment. So for example, on high expectations for youth and staff development, organization promotes staff development. So these are some of the interview questions we look at, is what type of orientation is provided or required for new employees. We want to see for this, we'll ask, so if I'm doing the interview with Julia, I'd ask her these questions, I'd ask her it. But what I'm going to also ask for is, what's the evidence of it? Is this something you're like, well, normally we have the person do this, and normally they may, or is it something that's documented or written down? So you may have that as, yep, for that top item you can see here inside of it when we go and score. The best practice, new staff participates in 8 or more hours of pre-service orientation activities and pre-service orientation activities, including elements of youth development. So that's the best practice. So that may be the practice, but what we're going to ask is, what's the evidence that we know that consistently happens? Is it written down? Do you have an orientation schedule? Do you have it in your policy and procedures manual? And if not, you may still score a 5 because you're doing it, but we put that as a note, and that might even be, even though you scored a 5, might be the item that you focus on for your 1 or 2 goals that you're looking to do out of this for the year, and say, hey, we're doing orientation, but we don't have anything written down what we're doing. We should really write it down so that if I leave my position, the next person knows what's been our standard. So that is some of the focus behind the tool, is even if there's a 5, there might be ways that we can strengthen and improve that, or really look at the institutionalization of quality practices. In this case, orientation, which is one frequently I see. We've had to do that in our own agency recently. Now we have an AmeriCorps program. Used to kind of haphazardly, here's our orientation, here's some videos, here's some things to read, and now had to really write it down and document, this is what our procedure is for that orientation. And it helps us move as an agency to that 5 level ourselves. So that's how the tool is really looked at and used, is that it's this combination of us doing these interview questions, for us having conversations, asking a clarifying question of being like, so something like that orientation, where is it documented or written down, to look to see how is it meeting that and how are we sustaining that with the transition. We know so many of our programs do unfortunately have high transition rates that we want to look to see. I'm going to jump to a couple other items here. So for this one, and this may look different again for each organization. So I'm going to switch to, this is under the domain area 3, access consistent staff presence. So staff available and longevity with the organization supports youth and staff relationship. So those are all the items. We're not looking at the item first. First, we're going to start off with the interview questions. So we're going to ask things such as, what's the typical range of age of kids? What's the ratio you're using? Some programs may not have a defined ratio. It's, again, that is okay. Others have a real hard set. If you're a licensed school age program, you know that ratio because you're required to maintain it by law. Others may not. This is a conversation around, is this a program that has 30 kids to 1 adult? Is this a 10 kid? Sometimes that may ebb and change. Maybe when, the kids first get in, do snack, it's 1 or 2 staff members monitoring the lunchroom, and then program time is different. So again, these are some of the conversations we're having and looking to see what's the documentation inside of your organization that shows this is happening. We then go back with the staff and we then break it out, or with the coordinator, and we score together. Some of these ratios, again, these are just things that are industry best practices. We may never in our organization, because of our staffing structures or our volunteer or other pieces, have that 5, and that is okay. You can see here, Marcy, this is one where there is some age differentiation that is typically, again, looked on that agency best practice of, in an out of school time setting, what's different for those age ratios. That may not be the case for school. We know schools have their kind of ratios they're using. That is okay. Again, it's part of the conversation we're having with Form B.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So just in regards to ratio, how are those numbers decided upon? My understanding is that industry best practice is anything below a 15-to-1 for out of school time. So, but this says that for a 5, it's 10-to-1.
Yeah.
So where is that? That seems conflicting to me.
So this is actually, you will see this number as typically the agency organization best practice actually in licensed school age child care programs. So licensed before and after school programs. So like in the municipality of Anchorage, it's a 1-to-10 ratio. And we did not develop this. This is not Alaska centric. This is from national research best practices, as they say, for K through 3rd, for those early learnings programs, is a 10-to-1. Now, is that what a lot of our programs follow? No, that's totally okay. Again, it's just having that conversation of, does the agency have an expectation even around ratio? Or is that something that it's a free flow of kids? This, for some of our programs last year that went through this, it was a conversation of like, okay, our numbers are increasing for the number of kids showing up. We want more youth in our program space. We've got to talk about, that they were falling from initially here when they opened to the end of the school year when more kids were coming in and they had a 25 kid to 1 ratio. And that was when they had to look at, okay, maybe we have to start looking at hiring more staff or bringing more volunteers in. So it's more of a conversation of, is there a documented spot that you want to be? Some programs may not have any ratio requirement, others may. So that's, again, some of the conversation we have with the Form B. Less of the score, more on the conversation, more on, again, looking at, is there a documented proof on how we're doing these quality practices, or why we chose not to do those quality practices too. That's okay as well. Julia, any questions from you?
No, sorry, my audio is also not working great today, so I'll put my questions in the chat if I have any, but this is awesome. Thank you.
Okay, great. Super. All right, I'm going to move this back to our slide deck here presentation. I think you should see the slide deck back on. So what do we do with the data? So once we have done the interview, so again, the interview itself, it's about 1.5 hours to 2 hours that we are doing. So myself or Aaron would set up an interview time with the coordinator. We meet and have the discussion with you around the assessment tool. So we do the interview, we score the page together to be able to move forward with it. We enter the data then into Scores Reporter. So that's our data dashboard. The next part then is improve. So this is sorry, there should be a plan bubble, I think, in there that we dropped. That was the plan. Sorry, we were looking at the data. The planning again. So this planning part here, what we were doing with, we collected the data, we entered the data, plan, you get your data back. During planning with data, what we are looking for is at the organizational level is for a school district or a nonprofit or whoever that we're working with to set 1 or 2 goals during the planning process that they're focusing on. Just like Marcy said, she's like, well, we can't do some of those things, or that's not what we do. Great, move it past that, choose another item. Or maybe again, we scored a 5, but we don't have anything documented that says it, that's where we're going to focus on. So during the plan part, we're choosing it, we're setting actionable SMART goals. So they're going to be specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time bound. had to dust that memory file back off from way here. So you'll set a goal, you'll submit the goal into Scores Reporter. If you're having a hard time figuring out your goal, that's something you'll work with myself or Aaron with. We then go into the improve phase. So that's the 90-day turnover, or the 90-day quality improvement process. We will reach out to you to say, how are you doing at that agency one? What resources could you use? Would you like a sample policy or procedure? Do you want us to read over something in maybe your operations manual? That's some of the type of coaching you'll have in that improve phase. What we found the big part and benefit for folks with the organizational assessment was it just allowed them to, again, to look at their documentation to be like, well, why do we do the things we're doing at program site? And how do I make sure if I stop working here, that that's going to keep moving forward? What we recommend is that agencies do not need to do Form B every year. It should be about every 2-3 years, or if there's a substantial organizational staff turnover or changes to the organization. So like Jean right now is in a great spot. Her organization is going through a big change. They're getting a brand new building. They're changing around their program structure. This is a great time to look at that. So she may say, this is our goal, but next year, because that's really our first year in after being in the space, I want to go back through and look to see how I'm doing. That might be appropriate. For someone in like Marcy's spot, it might be, I did it, great, we're good. I'm going to do it the next time I have a new grant application coming through or a new grant. So I can look to see, are those organization supports are there? So it doesn't have to be every year, whereas those on-site observations with the YPQA and school age PQA are designed to be every year. So that way we're, again, doing that ongoing assessment about what's happening at the program level. Organizations, you don't need to do the full interview every year. Any questions about that improved phase?
Let me know if you can. Structuring to our youth leadership program right now.
I'm sorry, Julia, you're breaking up a little bit on me. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll type it in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the big part, again, what we're looking at on the screen, so our pyramid of youth program quality, those are the four major domains in the Form A, the YPQA or SAPQA tool. That's the self-assessment or external assessment happening at your program site that watches the interaction with youth. So these pyramid here is what we're seeing at the program site. Form B is the things that help support that happening in place. Whether you're using the data from your direct program observation or you're using Form B, we're still using that process, assess, plan, improve, and we're continually looking back to see how are we going and improving that process. Without anything else, I'm going to open up the floor to see any conversations from the group or questions that folks might have. All right, and I'm going to check to see with Aaron. Aaron, anything I didn't cover? And also, do we need to get anyone on this call signed up for Form B interviews? I think we have. I'm going to pull up. You're going to all see my very messy box here in a minute. I believe, and we can stop recording, Aaron, as well. I believe, Jean, we have yours Friday at